Hello, ladies, and welcome to Looking Up. This is a podcast for Christian women. Carla Moore and I'm Kathy Pollard. We're your hosts for this podcast. And our theme verse is Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, which reminds us that because we're in Christ and we've been raised with Christ, that we don't set our minds on things below, but on things above. I just butchered that verse all over the place.
You didn't.
But we want to keep looking up. That's the idea. And so every week when we get together and have a conversation, we hope that things that we talk about will be encouraging. We always pray that's the case. And we thank you so much every single time for joining in and listening and for encouraging us and doing this with us. We feel like every time this is kind of a conversation that we're just having together, sitting around a table, grab something to drink. Let's just talk. Let's just have some good sisterhood conversation. And speaking
My favorite kind of day.
That's right. Speaking of good sisterhood conversation, Carla, how are you?
I'm doing well. And the day that this comes out is going to be my birthday.
Oh,
yeah. I just
happy
looked at the date and
birthday.
realized that was the same day. That's the day we'll be coming home from the trip. So
Happy
I'll be
birthday
flying
to
all day long.
you.
Thanks.
Everybody, message, text, email, right on the board. Happy birthday to Carla. You look
That's one of the
younger
best
than
parts.
ever.
That's one of the best parts about your birthday, isn't it? Is all the happy birthday texts and things.
Yes, that's very nice. Your hair looks good.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I colored it last night. Did I say
did
that
you?
out loud? I don't color my hair.
That's not your
It's color
natural.
naturally.
Your hair's not yet.
25 years ago.
That's right. Did you start graying early?
Oh, I did. Yeah. I was probably 30. I mean, I know people do earlier than that, some, but yeah, at 30 years old. So that's a few years ago. And I mean, I think gray hair is beautiful, but once you kind of start doing this, it's hard to stop unless you just want to grow it out skunk style. And that's probably what I'll have to do someday.
The little transition phase.
Yeah. Well, John likes it better brown. So as long as he wants it that way, I'll keep doing it. So you got the blonde hair that hides it better. So
yeah, it's a little bit of a conundrum sometimes, but
yeah.
Oh well, alas.
It's just hair, right?
While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to jump in with this so I don't forget. I wanted to mention the Equipped workshop because we're about a month out from that now, and it's in Bowling Green, Kentucky, at the Lehman Avenue Church of Christ. This will be our second year hosting that event, and we invite all of our listeners to come join us. And selfishly, because you and I get to do a session there, in which we'll be recording an episode of this podcast live in front of a studio audience.
So we need the little signs that say clap.
Yes.
Cheer.
Act like we're fantastic.
Yeah. Have we talked about what we're going to talk about?
We have not talked about that yet, but we would love to be looking at your faces while we're recording that episode. And we'd love for you to come join us. The whole event is free. And we're going to have food trucks set out in the parking lot and lots of great speakers. We're having Andy Baker come do a singing workshop and lead the singing. So that'll be wonderful. Oh, and I wanted to share some of the other women speakers. On Friday is Christy Woodall, who's my sister, and Lori Boyd and Alicia Bookout. And on Saturday is Catherine Baker, Melissa Kane, and then you and me doing the Looking Up episode.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it.
I am looking forward to that also. And it'll be here before we know it.
There's lots of choices. Like there's at least 4 different choices each hour, right? At least most of the sessions. So, I mean, there really is something for everyone. Y'all did an amazing job fitting everyone in. You know, your building's not huge. It's good size, but figuring out where everyone's going to sit and where everyone's going to speak. And it was really, really well done. Same food trucks this year?
No, we have.
Is Jeremy doing his
Jeremy's food truck is going to be there. So come for the brisket alone. It will be worth the trip, I promise you. But yeah, and this will probably, Lord willing, this will be our last one in this building. We've already started building the new building on the property. Yeah. So Equipped 2025 should be in that new location in that brand new building. So we'll have more space.
That'll be great. When is it? When is the building supposed to be finished?
Well, I don't know an exact date. Some early estimates I've heard we could be in there by this November.
Oh, wow.
So that would be wonderful, but who knows?
Yeah.
Lots happened in the past week or two. A lot has changed. We drove by there the other day and then we drove by again today, and it's like, whoa, so much more has gone up. So it's exciting to watch it happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to come. We got our tickets this week, so we're ready.
Yay. Can't wait. What's
Yeah.
new with you?
Well, I was just going to mention that John and I are making a few changes in our life. It sounds big, and it's a little big, but not huge big. We're not going to be doing no.
Surprise,
I don't know if
baby.
anybody saw that, but we are not going to. Well, we will not revisit that word. Okay, back to the serious subject.
Okay, sorry, I'm listening.
So this, we've been traveling back and forth. We've been traveling back and forth to Denver to be at Bear Valley for a little over 7 years now. And we love it here. We love the people. Some of our best friends in the whole wide world are here, but we have felt the need to be closer to home for different reasons. It's not one single reason. My mother is getting older. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening to this, but it's true. And I just want to be there where I can help her more, because here I just feel like I'm not helpful at all. And I know that I could be more helpful if I were closer to her and able to, help with doctor visits and just keep her company. And Athena Sherfus is a caretaker for her and just is one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. She loves on my mom and she has been a godsend to us, and Doug and Karen take good care of her. But I know, anyway, I'd like to be closer to be able to help with things to take care of her. Our kids are all in the Central Texas area. The oldest is near Houston, the middle near Fort Worth, and the youngest San Antonio. And they each have children. And it just feels like sometimes that we are a world away from them when we're up here. And the kids are involved in different things that every time we talk to them, one of the kids will say, can you come to this or that? And we can't. I mean, we just, our life has become one thing after another, and it just sometimes feels overwhelming, and it feels like we need to prioritize, and we need to, I don't know if downsize is the right word. We just need to figure out where to maximize our efforts instead of feeling like we do right now, which is going everywhere all the time, all at once, and with our hair flying. And it just sometimes doesn't feel like we're effective as it could be if we would just focus on a few smaller, I don't know how to say it, a few less things. And just for the sake of our health, physical, spiritual, mental health, we've just kind of had to make some decisions. And we're still going to be coming to Bear Valley different parts of the year. We just don't know exactly yet what that's going to look like. We're still trying to figure that out. And most likely we'll come for 1 quarter instead of 2. And maybe John will teach a short course here and there, but we are going to be closer to home. I mean, at home. And we'll still be doing our trips, Lord willing. All of this is Lord willing, of course. Right. But there's so many projects that John has in the fire with World Video Bible School, so many things to do with the video footage that he has. And he really would like to focus more on having all of the Bible Land projects done, because it just feels like he has all of this information that we've gathered. So many people before us have done that too, but all of this information that he's been gathering over the past 10-ish years needs to be organized better so that it's useful for generations to come. Not, he doesn't want it to go away when he's gone. He wants it to be something that's useful for people after us. And that takes some intention of saying, I'm going to spend the time to do this. And so anyway, we told the students about it. We've talked to Denny, and I mean, everyone around here knows, but we just wanted to mention that we have people that help support our work, and we hope and pray that they will continue to do so. We'll still be doing the same things, but just hopefully on a more concentrated, less scattered, I think is maybe the way I want to put it. Just feel really scattered sometimes. And we want to do what God wants us to do and do it the best that we can. So we're trying to been doing a lot of praying about it and a lot of thinking. So I would appreciate everyone's prayers and yours. And I mean, you and I've talked about this a lot, so it's not a surprise to you, but that's kind of a new thing for us. And that will start. I mean, we're wrapping up our quarter here. When this episode airs, we will be packing up and heading out to go back toward Texas this week. And we stop along. This is the way life goes. On the way home, we stop at John's going to do a family seminar in Oklahoma, Burns Flat, Oklahoma. And then we get home, we have a little bit of time. We have a family trip one weekend, but we have Focal Point. We leave from Focal Point for Equipped. We leave from Equipped to go to a gospel meeting in Ottawa, Chattanooga area. John has another meeting in Idaho after that, and then we have another trip after that. So it just feels, I almost had like a mini meltdown the other night when I opened up the calendar, because I just want to be home sometimes. And I miss being home, and I miss my mom. I miss my grandkids and my kids. And so this, Lord willing, will be a sort of a solution towards that, at least to help us focus our efforts more and do what God wants us to do. So.
Well, we will all definitely be praying about that. And I know it was no easy decision. It was probably pretty difficult for you guys, because I know you, and you don't do anything half-hearted. You throw your whole heart into whatever work you're a part of, and that includes the Bear Valley work that you guys have done such a great job with. So I know it's hard for you even to make those kinds of decisions. And, big picture wise, you can kind of see we're spread too thin. We're trying to cover too much. There's only two of us. But when it comes down to the nuts and bolts of, okay, so what do we do about that? That's the hard part.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What is that going to look like? And I'm sure it wasn't easy at all. So
yeah. And I mean, we haven't, it hasn't all been decided and figured out yet financially. It just, all of those things we just know God will take care of that. And when we were home for the quarter, the November, December, it just really became evident. It was very obvious. And that's something we had prayed about, was to know when it was time to make some changes. And it was just very, very, very obvious during that 2-month period of time that we needed to be home more. So I'm thankful that was, that God helped us to see that that's what we needed to do. So anyway,
it'll be
enough about me. How are you?
Well, I'm thankful that you shared that with all of us. And I know we have such a great supportive community of women that I feel is such a huge blessing in both of our lives. And knowing that everyone listening loves you and cares about you and is going to be praying about that, that's got to be encouraging.
Oh,
so.
It means the world to me. Yeah. And, when we came here, y'all were here for a couple of years. And, when we came, that wasn't why, obviously, but it was a bonus that y'all were here. And then I knew that y'all wouldn't stay here, just because that things change, life changes, opportunities come. So, we made friends with everybody here, and the people that we work with are some of our dearest friends on earth, and yours too, I know. And the students, they just become part of your family. This, you have brothers and sisters and children and just people that you just love with all of your heart. But we've been doing this long enough to know that doesn't change. It just, you have family all over the world and all over the country. And so it just is enhanced. And it's a little hard to leave some situations and places and people, but you and I have been around long enough to know that God, he does some pretty crazy, wonderful things and puts you in situations that you just can't even see coming. And so there's no telling what will happen in the future, but confident in God.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Yeah. I really don't have anything new to share, except that I'm finally using my brand new Dutch oven that I got for Christmas.
I thought you said you weren't going to use it.
I wasn't going to. You know what? I kind of got tired of dusting it off.
It's meant to be used.
It's just a showpiece sitting on my stove because it's so pretty. And I have to keep dusting it off. And finally today, I'm making that poor man's roast that we've talked about on here before.
You can almost smell your house from here.
Oh man, because Neil loves that stuff. And this time he asked me to put some baby carrots in it. So I'm trying that. We'll see how that goes. But I was looking at that Dutch oven and I was like, I'm just gonna do it. So finally having its christening right now. It is in.
It's going to
I use
taste even
both.
better.
Yeah, I use both Dutch ovens because I use my red one to make the sourdough bread, and then I use my new one for the poor man's roast. So hopefully it doesn't get too messy and it'll be easy to clean out.
Oh, I mean, it will. I have one that's fairly new, and I learned not to use metal spoons on it. It just makes marks on it. So be careful. I don't know if your red one has that. Is it enameled cast iron?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So use plastic spoons or, a rubber spatula or something. Just, it's not terrible. It doesn't like make it black. It just has little marks on it where the metal spoon has scooped things out. Yeah. So
I am glad you said that because that's what I would have done. I always serve this meal with a metal spatula that I lift up the chunks of beef with, and
get you a rubber one.
Yeah.
And then be prepared for Neil to use a fork or spoon in there and mark it up. So it'll happen.
Anyway.
It's okay. It's meant to be used.
As long as it's all on the inside, I guess. I'll just keep the lid on it.
Yeah.
It's meant to be used. That's right. And that's how it is because we get all these pretty things and then we don't want to use it. And why do you have it? Neil will be so happy.
Well, why didn't you put your bread in that one instead of the roast?
Well, the bread cooks at such a high temperature that the bottom of that Dutch oven has almost like it almost looks like the pieces of the Dutch oven itself have burnt, even though the bread has never burnt. And the only thing I can come up with is because I have to preheat the Dutch oven at such a high temperature before I bake the bread in it. And so I didn't want to risk doing that with the pretty one.
Okay.
So I'm gonna save the red one for the bread.
Okay.
And the pretty one for this one time that I'm cooking in it.
Yeah. You're christening.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything you want to share? Anything else you want to share before we hop into our topic for the day?
I don't think so.
Okay. So we're actually this is sort of like a part 2 of what we talked about last time. Last episode, we talked about regrets and what to do with regrets that might be hanging on. So today's topic is living satisfied. And so it's kind of a follow-up study to the one we did last week. And the reason is because when you look at that word regret and you look at the antonyms for it, the strongest antonym for regret is satisfaction, followed closely by contentment and delight. And so I thought, what does that even look like? Is it even biblical to try and live a life of satisfaction? And if so, how? So I kind of thought that would be a great follow-up to the one that we had last week. And just to clarify, obviously, I'm not talking about not growing. We're not saying be satisfied with where you are now when it comes to Bible study or Christian growth. Or we're all to be growing in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So obviously, that's not what we're talking about. But can you live satisfied? Or should you always feel like things aren't good enough or you're lacking in some way? I don't think that's the case. I think we can live satisfied, and that's kind of what I want us to talk about today. So before we get into maybe some how-tos, do you want to add anything to that?
I was kind of surprised that satisfied was the strongest antonym of regret. And I don't know why. I just had never really thought about what's the opposite of regret.
I know. What word would you think of?
I don't know. If you don't regret something, you're happy about it, which I guess if you think about regret is something that you get you just mull over. At least this is the way I think of regret, is like we talked about last week. It's just something that haunts you and that you're distracted by. Whereas on the other end of that, maybe freedom would be an antonym to
that's
a freedom, or I don't know. I don't know. It's something good to think about.
The only thing I could think of was pleased. You're not worried about how something went or unfolded or choices you made, and so you're pleased or you're at peace. That was another thing that popped into my mind. And
I like that one.
Those probably are in that list because there was a huge list, but it said strongest antonyms for it. Like these are the best ones, and it said satisfaction, contentment, and delight. And so I thought we should talk about that. We should flip that coin the other way around and talk about that too.
Good.
Okay, so the first thing that came to my mind was don't listen to Satan's lies. And we talked about this in the last episode. You said, who wants us to be carrying around this regret, guilt, remorse, whatever it might be? It's not God. It's not your Christian family. It's not the people that love you. It's the enemy, the accuser, as you said. So that is so true. And he wants us to feel like we're not good enough. So if you've got that little whisper going on in your mind when you look in the mirror, you're not good enough. You're not doing enough. I think that's a big one. Or you don't measure up. Then, who are you listening to? That's not a biblical message. And so I don't know how far to chase this, but not to be confused with we don't earn grace, we don't earn salvation. So we're not talking about that. But this whole idea of feeling less than when it comes to being worthy of serving, going forward, taking advantage of opportunities to do things, to talk about Christ to other people, to teach a Bible class. Sometimes we let regrets and things keep us from doing that because we're listening to Satan's lies. That I'm not the person to do that because I've got these things in my past or whatever. So that Satan's lies, you're not good enough, you're not doing enough. Just go ahead and turn that off. Recognize the source of it.
While you're
Walk away from
talking,
that. Don't believe it.
I know I've told you about this. I'm scrolling to find something that I doodled. Here it is, finally. I told you about it and I haven't finished it yet, but it was a lesson that was about Satan being the accuser and how he's our adversary, which means the definition of that word, our adversary, is like the opposing attorney. If you're at court, if you are the defendant in court, he is the attorney on the other side that's accusing you of doing something wrong. And so he is our adversary, the accuser. And so I'll just show you this. And those of you who
Look
are
at that.
listening, yeah, it's a doodle,
courtroom.
but I really want to finish kind of playing with it because I drew a picture. There's the defendant, it's me, and I have my head down and I'm carrying this big bag of regret. In fact, I wrote that in here, memories and regret. And there I'm behind the table, and on the other side, this is the other table, the devil, and he's saying, there's a little word bubble coming out, and it says she's jealous, she gossips, she's careless, she's prideful, she's disrespectful, she's lazy, she doesn't do right, she doesn't always tell the truth. Don't you remember when she blah 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 blah? And on my side, I just have my head hanging because he's right. I mean, he's right, and he's accusing me of all those things. But then in between is my advocate, which is Jesus. He's my advocate. He's my mediator. He's able to help me. He's my friend. But I just got to thinking about this one day because of the lesson. I can't even remember what the lesson was about, but he talked about the devil being our adversary and our accuser and how he's right. We really don't have anything that we can say that, the devil is wrong in those things. But what do we do with that? What is it that we just wallow in that and roll around in it and just say, well, okay, you're right. I'm good for nothing. I'm not worth anything to God. I'm just worthless. Or no, we remember what God did for us. We remember that he came to earth and went to the cross and he took our penalty. And so he's the one that stands he really stands between us and the devil, and he stands between us and God to remind us that he's able to help us. He's our friend. He's the one that's wanting us to remember what I did for you. Don't think about those things, don't keep doing them, but don't think about it. So I'm kind of going back to the whole regret thing, but it just made me think about when you were talking about the devil wants us to live in all of that, and we just can't do it. We've got to learn to be satisfied in what Christ has done, because what he did satisfied what God required.
The debt against us. That's powerful. I love that doodle. I hope you'll finish it and share it and make it available somehow. It's really powerful. And I think especially for our children too, because they're going to be facing that as they grow up. And have their own little inner critics, and maybe sometimes even, I hate to say this out loud, but maybe sometimes Satan has a voice through other people. I hope that that's not the case for anybody listening in, but if there's somebody in your life that doesn't understand the Bible and what you have in your relationship with Christ, and they're saying things that aren't true, and you're listening to that and taking it to heart, just be careful about what you believe, what you choose to listen to, who you associate with,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, which leads to the second one, listen to God's promises. So don't believe Satan's lies. Instead, listen to God's promises. So your doodle's the perfect segue into that. But man, it was so easy to find the promises.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of beautiful ones in the Old Testament. Isaiah 26:3 says, "You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you." And I feel like that's the counterbalance to that, things that we're tempted to believe about ourselves. But, as we mentioned last time, keep looking to Christ. And if we keep our mind on him and everything that he says to us in his word and trust that it's true, then he will keep us in perfect peace, which surely is the opposite of regret and guilt and remorse.
Yeah.
Psalm 37. I'm actually going to read just one part of it because I want to come back to it at the end of this conversation. But Psalm 37:3-5, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him and he will act. So again, it's that whole, where's your focus? Who are you looking to? Maybe if we're dissatisfied with self and filled with regret, we're too absorbed with self, listening to ourselves, focusing on ourselves, relying on ourselves, trusting in ourselves. That's all backwards anyway. And so no wonder we're struggling,
It is so true. Just get out of your own head and stop being so self-absorbed. Sometimes we need that slap in the face to say, come on, stop thinking that it's all up to you and that it's just quit thinking about yourself. Good point.
Yeah, I read a quote one time that said, be careful what you say to yourself because you're listening.
But are you really?
Isn't it? Yeah. Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require of you? And I just love this verse because, I know there's big context to it, but it's not this huge thing. What does the Lord require of you?
Yeah.
What would we fill in that blank with? What do we think it must be? Let me get my pen and paper out and list it all out. It's got to be this huge, long, important, powerful list. But what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that, you're trusting God's promises, you can live with satisfaction. And then I just put Romans 8. And
I was just looking at that,
which you mentioned in our last episode. That's that whole contrasting chapter, and starts out with, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And I remember years ago my dad referred to those as the no blessings of Christianity, some things that we don't have to worry about anymore.
Yeah.
And that whole, just read all, if you struggle with it, or you struggle with self-doubt, dissatisfaction, you're not living a life of satisfaction, just read all of Romans 8. Just soak in, like verse by verse. Slowly soak it in and take it to heart.
Write it down.
That's right. Yeah.
There was I was looking at some passages too, and I wrote down two different ones from Romans 8, no condemnation, and then Romans 8:28. And I wrote down, use the past to know he is working. So we know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love the Lord. So even those bad things he can use for good. And I've seen that over and over, things that we thought were bad turned out to be good. And they might have hurt at them in the moment, or they might have, we thought that they were damaging, but God turns things around and he makes all things new and he makes things beautiful. doesn't mean that everything's going to be good, but it can be used for good. It can be used to help us grow. It's like those passages in James that talk about how we are to embrace trials because they help us to be better people. So, Romans 8, I went there too. Speaking of the accuser, Revelation 12:10 talks about the accuser being thrown down. So we look to the future knowing that, sorry, I got the frog today. That yes, the devil has power in this world. He's the prince of this world, but he doesn't win. And I think about that all the time. You know, he may think he's winning. It gives me great joy to know that he's not going to win, that God will overcome. We will overcome. So I wrote down how if we are in the word, that's going to help us. And Psalm 19, just the whole Psalm 19, the law, if we're in the word, how is it going to help us to be satisfied? The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true. They are righteous altogether. They are more desirable than much gold. It goes on to say what the word does. By them your servant is warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. So just there's being in the word is going to help us be satisfied with our life because we know that God is taking care of us no matter what.
Yeah. And that helps us when we forget, because we're forgetful. We're forgetful humans. Stay in the word so you do remember God's promises. And that's what you're listening to instead of the enemy yourself. Stay in the word and remember all the things that God promises. You said something that made me think about something Neil said in a recent lesson. How can you know that God's going to be with you today and tomorrow? Look at yesterday.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because he has been and he will continue to be.
Mm-hmm.
I read something. I know it's not always good to read things, but I thought this was so good because satisfaction and peace. I was looking at peace as opposed to regret. And this was something that I came across and I took a screenshot and I don't remember where it came from, but it's called A Desperate Soldier. This is how to have peace. When an ancient city was at war or under siege, the watchmen stood at the walls to watch for the enemy. While others rested, they had to be vigilant at all times, staring into the dark, searching for any sign of threat or danger. If they fell asleep or were distracted and the enemy attacked, the city would be at great risk. The lives of their friends and family hung on their ability to stay awake and alert. Watchmen surveyed as much as they could to see in the pitch black night, not sure where to look or what to expect. They watched and watched for hours, feeling afraid and exhausted, until morning broke, and then the sun brought everything to light, finally relieving them of their post. And Psalm 130 says, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than watchmen for the morning. What does inner peace look like? What does inner peace in God look like in a broken world? Like a war-torn soldier staring into darkness, aware of enemy threats on every side, desperate for sunrise, not doubting or despairing, but genuinely desperate, confident that the sun will rise. And I thought, that's us, because peace looks different to a Christian. Peace is not the absence of trouble, but it's that hope and that confidence that no matter what, that you're going to be okay because God is in control. But I just thought that was so interesting because whoever wrote this, the author wasn't saying that that you're not tired, that you're not watching, that you're not the one staring into the dark. You're not the one that's thinking about there's enemies out there, because we have to be doing that while we're in this life. But peace, I guess what's important to me about that is that the world, we want to think that being a Christian means that we're not going to have trouble. And we are going to have trouble, but we are going to have the ability to cope with it. And we're going to have that peace that we know that God will take care of us. It doesn't matter if that includes life or death, that we're going to be okay, so that we're we're watching and we're protecting and we're looking out for others, looking out for our families, and for trying to protect what God has put in our hands.
Well, and the whole idea of peace and satisfaction doesn't mean it's without difficulty or doing things that are hard. And you can do things that are hard and still feel satisfied, you know. And I know I've mentioned this on here before, but I keep going back to, you know, we're trying this farm life thing. And it brings a great deal of satisfaction and delight and contentment, but it's just not always easy. And
it's a lot of work.
Every week I feel like we have to figure something new out that we didn't know or expect. And, you know, storms come and fling the chicken run across the property, or animals get sick, animals can die, and, you know, crops fail. I mean, things happen all the time. You're always addressing what comes up. And yet still at the end of the day, when you pillow your head, it just feels good, you know, and you can go to sleep, even though it's hard, even though there were obstacles, you go to sleep with satisfaction. And I think it's just the perfect analogy for that Christian walk. You know, it's not that there will never be challenges, difficulties, that we will never, ever, if we've got regrets from things in our past, we might have more. We might make more mistakes. We might say other stupid things. And we might hurt somebody's feelings again. It's probably going to happen. But, you know, we do what we can to learn from it, grow from it, make it right, you know, and walk with Christ, trusting in him and the peace that he can give, even through all of that, you know, all of the mistakes. And so don't listen to Satan's lies, believe in God's promises. And then I thought, delight in the Lord. So if that's one of those strongest antonyms for regret, is delight, then to live satisfied, delight in the Lord. And sometimes I think that we do so feel frantic, or worried or stressed, or we're filling our lives with all these things that we think that we have to be doing. And I'm not saying don't serve, because that's what the Christian life is all about. But if it's a matter of, I'm not good enough and I need to check all these things off the list, you know, then we kind of rob ourselves of the joy of Christianity. And we rob ourselves of even time and quietness to delight in the Lord. And we have so many reasons to do that. When we come together for worship, you know, a beautiful, beautiful time and reason to delight in the Lord. When we go to him in prayer, or we see answered prayers, we can delight in that. When we spend time with Christian family, we can delight in that. Delight is something that gives great pleasure or joy. And for us, it's a verb. It's an intentional action. It's not something that we're waiting to fall upon us or happen. It's been a delightful day. It just happened that way. But you get up in the morning and you determine to take joy in the Lord, to rejoice in the Lord, to delight in God. Isaiah 61:10 says, I delight greatly in the Lord. My soul rejoices in my God. And so maybe if you're not living satisfied and you feel that missing, you know, maybe some quiet time and thinking, what are the areas that I can right now delight in the Lord? And what has he done for you? What have you been blessed with? What are some things maybe you took for granted? What are some things maybe you haven't made the most of that you can embrace now? You know, there's just a few minutes to think about that. And that's what I said. I wanted to come back around to Psalm 37. And I guess technically, this is one of David's Psalms. I guess technically he's sort of focusing on other people, like his enemies or people in the world who are even ignoring God. But they look like they're having the good life. You know, it's kind of one of those kinds of Psalms. But it caught my attention because 3 times in the first part of this Psalm, it says, do not fret. And the message from last week about regret, I feel like those are kind of tied together. Things that we're wringing our hands over, fretting about. Do not fret in verses 1, 7, and 8. And instead, so this would be a fun personal Bible study thing to do. Just print off Psalm 37, circle those three do not frets, and then look what we are to do. And again, they're not these big, important accomplishments or tasks. It's trust in the Lord, verse 3. Delight yourself in the Lord, verse 4. Commit your way to the Lord, verse 5. And rest in the Lord, verse 7. So it's this whole, instead of all the inner critic, negative self-talk, regret, remorse, guilt, trust in the Lord. Delight in the Lord. And when I looked at those 4 things, trust in the Lord, delight in the Lord, commit to the Lord, rest in the Lord, I just wrote in the margin, how to live satisfied, because how could you not if that's your objective each day? And then when we do that, it says, he will give you the desires of your heart. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light. So again, let's just take that pressure off of ourselves. And I can trust in the Lord. He will bring forth my righteousness. I don't have to be worried about that part. He took care of that already for me. And I'm just going to trust that about him.
I ran across Psalm 131, another Psalm of David, and interesting in light of the stuff going on in our life and the way I feel sometimes lately. And I even hesitate to say this because everyone's busy. Everyone's got stuff going on, and it's not just us, but I have almost felt frantic isn't the right word, but just, I don't know, just like I can't catch up with myself, and there's no rest. And I don't mean that we don't sit down and do, read a book or whatever, but there's, especially with John, I feel sometimes like his mind does not shut off, that he's always going from one thing to the next. And, he's teaching, but then he's thinking, I've got to finish grading so that I can turn in my grades before we can get on the plane. And then when we get on the plane, then I'm studying for the next thing that's happening. And I feel that in a different way, not as much as he doesn't ever complain about it, although I worry about him for him sometimes. Mm-hmm. But this passage in Psalm 131, O Lord, my heart is not proud, nor my eyes haughty, nor do I involve myself in great matters or in things too difficult for me. There's a lot of those things, but I love this. Surely I have composed and quieted my soul like a weaned child rests against his mother. My soul is like a weaned child within me. And I just thought that made me smile, and it brought tears to my eyes to imagine, because it's a weaned child. It's not a child who's running to his mama to be nursed because he needs something, but that picture of like a weaned child rests against his mother. And, I see my grandchildren that run to their mom and they climb up in her lap and they just lean on her. And I remember some of the most peace-filled times in my life was when all 3 of my boys were leaning against me, and I used to sometimes be frustrated with it in worship because I had one on each shoulder and one in my lap. But when I think about that now, what I wouldn't give to have that child resting against me, because that child trusts you and finds joy and peace and comfort and everything they want, for a very short period of time in their life. You are what they want. But for all of our lives, if we focus on these things and we find our peace and satisfaction in God, we can be that weaned child that's just sitting in his lap, resting against him. So when there's all the tornado stuff going on, and I mean that figuratively, but just the franticness of life, but yet we can find that composed and quiet soul when we rest against God and find that peace and that satisfaction in him. And I just loved that mental image that I got when I thought about that. That can be me resting against God.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Did you say that was Psalm 131?
It's only 3 verses long. It's a beautiful psalm.
so much comfort from the Psalms. Neil just finished a quarter of, 2 quarters really, teaching on the Psalms. And he ended this one out by saying, if you're ever just going to listen to the audio Bible, just listen to Psalms. Even if it's just 10 minutes a day, it'll just change your life. That's what he said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, in the Psalm 37, if you go, it's kind of a lengthy one, Scott. 40 verses, but if you go through the whole thing, you see David is doing some things and the Lord is doing some things for David. And throughout the whole thing, the word that just keeps coming to my mind is intimacy. There's that relationship, and that's what God wants. And I think sometimes when we are dissatisfied or struggling with things from our past or things that we've done, it's because we feel like it has removed us from God in some way. We've messed it up. This is the best relationship I've had going, and I've messed it up. And maybe that's because of earthly relationships. Maybe we've lost friendships and dear people and things, but our relationship with God is never that way. And as long as we're walking in the light, he longs to be close to us, and he wants to have an intimate relationship with us. And when we remember that, I feel like it makes it that much easier to live satisfied and find the joy and take delight in him. And I found it interesting and looking into delighting in the Lord, how many times the Bible says that he delights in us. And particularly these Old Testament ones, his people weren't always delight worthy.
No.
And Deuteronomy 30, verse 9, Jeremiah 9, verse 24, and Zephaniah 3, verse 17 all say that the Lord delights in us, or that the Lord delights in his people. And we can look through their history and see how, they made mistakes and they did regret-worthy things, but God still wanted a close relationship with them. He still wanted to delight in his people.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of peace comes from that.
And I feel like we can ask the same question on this one that we did in the last one. Does it matter? Yes, because we are representing Christ, and we're representing what it looks like to have a relationship with him and to walk in the light. And it doesn't need to look like a fretful, worrisome, I never know if I'm quite making the mark. I never know if I'm quite good enough, or if the things behind me are catching up with me all the time. But instead, the opposite of that, learning to intentionally live satisfied in my trust in the Lord, contented in that, delighting in him and the relationship that we have because of what he has done with my righteousness, not because of anything that I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Walking in the light. That's a hard thing to, for some to grasp, a hard concept. It's not a matter of ever tripping up, messing up, but are you continuing toward God? Are we continuing toward God? And that brings a lot of peace when you know that you are. And what I guess messes us up sometimes is that we know if we focus on those areas where we trip up, those regrets, and we don't focus on the fact that we are still walking toward God, walking in the light, and find peace in that, and not finding misery in dwelling on the past regrets.
Yeah, it's kind of like a marriage, isn't it? And that I may say something really bad, really dumb or hurtful, or but we're still married. I haven't severed that relationship. I messed up and I said something I shouldn't have, or I did something I shouldn't have, but we're still married. And there is still reconciliation and doing better and covering it with kindness and moving forward and growing together and serving. It doesn't mean that, well, I really messed up, and so I guess it's all over, the end. And we understand that in marriage, but it's the same with our relationship with God. We don't fall out of favor with him because of something in our past and something that is haunting us that he's already forgotten. God's already forgotten, because that's what he promises.
Right.
God only expects us to do what we can. He doesn't expect us to do it all. And we know that everything we do through his strength, not ours. Philippians 4:13, and to
There's a
his
lot of peace in
glory.
that.
Yes, and his glory, not ours.
Mm-hmm.
1 Corinthians 10:31. So
good.
Oh God, do
I
you
feel
have anything
better.
else? I feel way better. Can we start over and talk about this again?
Yeah, like 25, 30 years ago.
That's right.
Good
Is there
chat.
anything else you want to add before we move on to
The
something
only
good for
other
you?
thing that I thought about was the Philippians 4. And, John talks a lot about this, especially in counseling, praying right, thinking right, living right. When we deal with things with prayer and supplication, giving thanksgiving, that's praying right. And then when we think right, it tells us of all of the things to dwell on. The New American Standard says dwell on these things that are good and right and just, as opposed to, regrets and the stuff that goes on in the world. We dwell on those things. And that in itself gives a lot of peace when we stop dwelling on the negative, stop listening to the news. I talked about YouTube TV. Don't listen to YouTube TV if it's bad news. I mean, we have to live in reality, but don't dwell on all that stuff. Forget it. Just, realize what's in your control and what's not, and let go of that. Dwell on the things that are right and good and peaceful and lovely, of good report, all of those things. Think right. And then the things that you've heard, then practice them, do those things. And, if you want to have a peaceful life, pray right, think right, live right. It seems so simple to say, and it is simple to say and harder to do, but I think that we could really take something very simple and simply do it and have some peace and satisfaction in life.
Yeah, good. I would just add, if you do find yourself struggling with this, and finding contentment in your Christian walk or dealing with regret, maybe check and see if you're spending too much time alone.
Yeah.
We're all seems like keep a little bit more to ourselves still these days, and we're holed up a little bit more, and we do more things online instead of just getting out there. And boy, can our thoughts wreak havoc on us when we do that. And sometimes people are away from God's people for a time because of an illness or whatever, and you really miss that sweet fellowship. Sometimes it's a decision that you've made not to be with God's people, but I would just encourage anybody who's struggling with that to get out there, be with other people, be with God's people, enjoy that sweet fellowship that He wants us to have, so that we can remind each other of the good and lift each other up and bear one another's burdens. And that's part of the reason that we have our Christian family.
Exactly. Good point.
Okay. Do you have something good for us?
Well, sort of. Yes, it is something good. It's an idea that I thought.
It's sort of good.
It's a good idea.
This is not called something sort of good for you.
That'd be kind of like dark chocolate, right? It's something
dark chocolate.
Sort of good for you.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
I just was thinking about the 2 weeks, the two different topics that we were talking about, and dealing with regret and living satisfied. And I thought, what if we were to intentionally and purposefully every week, maybe on Saturday evening, look back on the week and say, what's something that I can be proud of and have peace about that happened this week? And then what is something that I could do better next week? And just kind of make it a practice. It's just an idea. I was just kind of thinking about if we kind of did some introspection every week, pick a night, look back over the past week, and that I think would help us to live a little bit more intentionally, and to look at the positives and even look at the negatives, the regrets that we have, in a positive way, because we're trying to do something better. So that's just kind of what I thought about, something good for us
That's
to
not
do.
sort of good. That's really good. And I love that too, because sometimes, I think you said this in the last episode, we tend to want to just sweep things under the rug, not deal with it, but then it's kind of hanging over us. We can have that peace of knowing, I've already thought about that. I already put some intention on that, and I thought about it. And so now I can just move forward and grow from it. So
and always pray really when we do that, ask for God's forgiveness and God's help. and pray about it, and then put it behind us.
And it's perfect timing too, because we kind of mentally want to prepare for coming before God in worship anyway. Mm-hmm. What better way than to just do a little bit of a soul check there?
Yeah.
Right before we do that. That's
maybe
awesome.
Have a little journal or something.
Wish I had gone first, and I feel like I've been saying this every week.
I'm sure yours is good too.
Like you read poetry and it makes you cry, and then I'm going, well, one time.
Okay,
I want to tell you about this tortilla recipe.
I love tortillas. There's nothing wrong with tortillas.
You're doing like, I'm going to show you how to deal with the regret from now on. And I'm going, well, I learned this little trick about avocados.
Can we put the avocados on our tortillas?
Yes, you can. But no, it is a tip about avocados. So we just bought a bag from Sam's that had 6 avocados in it because they were Haas avocados and it was a great price. But there's only 2 of us. And you know how avocados are. They're like
not ripe.
And then you got that 1 or 2 days. Uh-huh. And then they're 2 ripe. So we've had 2 of them. Uh-oh. They're already heading toward past edibleness.
I bet your chickies would like them.
They would, but I don't want to feed them to the chickens. But anyway, did you know you can freeze avocados?
They don't turn brown?
No. So if you peel them and then, maybe slice them and just slice them in half, or maybe slice them into quarters and then lay them flat in the Ziploc bag so they're not on top of each other, because otherwise it'll freeze in a big mound. Now you wouldn't, when you're thawing them out, you wouldn't want to just like eat them sliced, because the texture will be a little bit different, but you can throw them into smoothies. You can make guacamole out of them once you've frozen them. And so that way, at least you haven't lost them. You can just freeze them. And I also learned that you can go ahead and actually make the guacamole and freeze it. And then when you thaw it out, it tastes very fresh, like you just made it. So,
and it doesn't turn brown. That's always the thing about avocado that kind of makes my stomach go, ugh.
Yeah.
And they are brown.
Yeah, they start turning colors.
It's not a pretty brown.
It's not. Well, we won't go there.
I did not say it. You almost said
it. On that boorish note.
Good discussion, except for that very last part.
Made me think of that picture you sent me the other day of us looking goofy. Mm-hmm. And I said, we should make that our equipped picture. And you said, what do you want to take away from our distinguished? What did you say?
Yeah, the people that think we are distinguished and well-behaved.
Oh, yes, we are. Okay. Thank you so much. I knew you would have good thoughts on this subject. Usually, if there's something I feel like I want to work on and think about, I'll say, let's let it be a topic, because I know Carla will help me.
Same here for you.
So thank you. And thanks to our listeners. We would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. So join us over on Facebook at the Looking Up with Kathy and Carla page. Let us hear from you. And until next time, Carla.
Keep looking up.
Love you, friends.
Love you too.
Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.